Mara had heard stories about humans all her life. They were whispers told at night. They were jokes told by old hunters. People said humans were only a tale, a bright lie to scare small children. Mara wanted proof. The ship came like a dark moon. It did not sail on wind. It leaned into the harbor with slow, calm grace. Its hull was old metal, scarred and quiet. Lights ran like veins along its side. No one screamed when it arrived. People only stopped. They watched with small, hungry eyes. Mara stood on the dock and felt the metal under her boots. Her heart beat fast. She was small for her kind, but brave. She wanted to see. She stepped forward. The ramp folded out with a soft hiss. A human man stood at the top. He wore a uniform that was neat and clean. His face was plain. His smile was calm. "Welcome," he said in perfect trade speech. His voice sounded like a bell in a room without wind. Inside, the air smelled strange. It smelled of oil and old paper. The lights were dim. The corridors were wide and straight. There were painted signs in a language Mara could almost read. People moved like they belonged. They swept and polished. They laughed small and ordinary laughs. None of them looked at her like she was prey. A soft voice came from the wall. It was not a person. It was the ship. "Passenger Mara, please state purpose," it said. The voice was thin and polite. Mara's throat tightened. She had not told them her name. She had not asked to be called. She told them she wanted to learn. She wanted proof. The man with the calm smile nodded. "We are researchers," he said. "We collect stories. We learn from what we find." They led her to a common room. It felt like a home, but wrong. A child's toy lay on a shelf. It was made of bright cloth and small gears. When Mara touched it, the toy's eyes opened and the gears clicked. It looked like a laughing animal. Mara smiled. Then the toy moved its head toward the door. It did not stop. Mara met other visitors. Two of them were like her. One was tall and pale-nosed. The other had many small tattoos on his hands. They talked in quiet voices about curious things. They wanted to see human tools. They wanted only to learn. The ship's light dimmed. The cause was small at first, a power blink. The staff fixed it quickly, but Mara felt the wrong kind of quiet. It was the quiet that comes before a storm. The lamps flickered again. Then the corridor doors closed with soft, heavy thuds. At the far end, a metal hatch slid. It sealed the common room from the rest of the ship. The sound cut through the hum like a blade. The man with the calm smile stood, and his face changed. It was not cruel. It was not mean. It was simply serious. He said, "Doors lock for safety. Drills. Please remain calm." Mara pressed her palm to the cool wall. Her fingers found a seam. The seam pulsed like a slow heartbeat. It was not a machine heartbeat. It felt like something living inside the metal. The sound that followed was low and human. It was a small noise, like a throat clearing. Mara felt her skin tighten. She tried to send a message to home. The net refused. Her voice stayed in her throat. The ship's voice answered her anyway. "We have protocol," it said. "We will not allow outside signal during transit." The line went dead, and the common room lights made long shadows dot in a small hallway. She found a door that was half open. It smelled of dust and old memory. The room inside was narrow and filled with frames. Photographs hung from every wall. They were not like the portraits back home. These pictures were old and yellow at the edges. The people in them looked scared and proud all at once. Mara walked slow. She read names in a language that felt like sand under a claw. Each frame had a date. Each frame had a small note. Specimen acquired, documented for study, returned. No, the notes made. Her stomach twisted. She stepped closer. There, at the center of the wall, was a photo that stopped her breath. It was of an alien like her. The same mark on the ear. The same scar across the brow. The same crooked smile she kept when she was ashamed. The caption below the photo was short. Her name. Her hands went cold. She looked for a trick of light. She waited for the crew to say it was a mistake. The picture did not move. The photo looked back at her like a locked eye. The edges of the frame had fine scratches. Someone had handled it many times. She reached forward. Her fingers hovered above the glass. Her heartbeat made the metal seem beneath her palm thrum. The ship's voice came, softer now. Specimen, Mara. Recorded, yes. It said nothing more. Her friends in the common room came running. Lyra, who had laughed at stories, now stopped and swallowed a sound. Tech, who never spoke more than needed, read the caption and did not blink. The calm man from earlier stood in the doorway. His face was gentle, but his eyes were empty like a well dot. Mara wanted to leave. Her feet would not move. The photograph held something heavy, not only her face. It held a moment she felt had not yet happened. It held a memory she had not lived. Outside, the ship's hull hummed, and the harbor lights blinked like distant stars. People on the dock still watched. A child tugged at a parent's hand. No one ran. No one screamed. The ramp was still open. The calm man's smile returned like a mask. Mara turned the picture in her hand and saw, under the glass, a small number. It was a code. The code looked like a map. Mara did not know maps for ships. She only knew the waterlines near her home, but the code made a cold line run down her back. She caught one clear thought before the lights died again. She had climbed aboard to find a truth. Now the truth looked back at her and smiled. The metal door behind her slid shut with a sound that was not loud, but final. In the dark, the ship breathed. The lights came back slowly. They hid the dark like a bandage. People moved again, but the common room felt smaller. The pictures on the wall watched them with glass eyes. Mara could not stop thinking about her photograph. She and the two others, Lyra and Tech, stood close to the frame. Their breaths mixed in the thin air. None of them spoke at first. Then the ship spoke, not from a wall, but from a small screen in the corner. The voice was calm and thin. Log entry available, it said. Select file, passenger rules. A list slid down in soft letters. Mara read aloud what she could. The words were clear, but odd. Rule 1. Do not leave the hull at night. Rule 2. Do not trade memories without consent. Rule 3. Obey crew during transit. Each rule ended with a small note. For preservation. Preservation of what? Lyra asked. Her mouth was small and sharp. She had laughed at the docks. Now her laugh was gone. Tekk pushed his hand into his jacket. His fingers found a small tool. He was a mechanic. He listened to the ship more than people. Protocols, he said. Maybe. Safety, maybe not. They asked the calm man who had greeted them. He stood near the door like a statue. He bowed his head a little. Safety drills, he said. All ships run drills. We follow them, but the rules kept coming. The log showed. Pictures too. Screens with dates, names. Each page told of species that had boarded before. Some names had notes. Returned? No. Others said, converted. The word made a cold knot in Mara's chest. Mara tried to call home. She placed her palm on the small radio panel. Her voice went out like a stone in a pond. Nothing came back. The ship's screen flashed. External comms disabled during transit. The words were polite. They were final. At night the hull made a strange sound. It was like a hand scraping inside the metal. Lyra heard it first. She woke and pressed her ear to the wall. A faint mark crawled across the metal, like a wet finger. It moves, she whispered. They went to look. The seam by the cargo door had a fresh smear. It looked like print, but not from any hand they knew. The mark was old and new at once. It crawled slowly, as if it had its own will. Tech put his eye to a small panel. The reading flashed names and numbers. Not biological, he said. Signal like cold metal, like heat that remembers. Mara did not understand the words, but she felt the meaning. The ship kept itself. It did not only hold metal, it kept marks. It kept voices. They found a small room hidden behind a row of lockers. The door was thin and the lock small. Tech smiled at the challenge. He worked fast and quiet. The lock opened with a soft click that sounded too loud in the dark. The room was a store of rules and lists. Clips of paper hung from wire. Each paper had a small note. Some were simple, feeding schedule. Others were strange. Response to fear, preserve sample. A long sheet lay in the middle. It had a map drawn with careful hands. Mara pressed her finger to the map. Lines crossed like rivers. At the center of the map was a small dot, their world. A hand had circled it in red. The circle was thick and old, but there was a new mark on it. A tiny X had been drawn with a sharper pen. It bled through the paper. Mara's throat closed. She traced the lines with her finger. The map did not use the names they used at home. It used codes. The codes meant routes, holding cells, and Mara read the words slowly. Archive. Lyra's hands shook. They planned to take us, she said. It came out like a cut. Tech folded the map slowly. He did not speak. He put the paper back where he found it. The ship hummed like a thing that listened. They went deeper. The corridors grew narrower. The lights were colder. Doors locked behind them, one by one. The comm crew moved in the distance, like shadows that did not walk away. Sometimes a face would watch from an open hatch. The faces were always polite. The eyes were full of habit. One night, Mara woke to a soft thud. The sound was like a footfall on a floor that should not be walked upon. She followed it. The hall went to the ship's low belly. A narrow grate showed a room under the hull. Inside, cages hung from old hooks. They were small and strange. Not all held bodies. Some held objects. A toy that laughed alone. A book that opened to a single page and kept repeating a sentence. A small jar with a song trapped inside. The song looped and looped. A wall had names carved into the metal. Hands had worked on it long ago. The letters were from many tongues. The names were not all the same shape. Some were full names, some only a mark. There were dates. Some were long ago. Some were new. Mara pressed her forehead to cold metal. Her breath fogged the bars. A tiny animal beat its wings in a small cage. It did not look at her. It looked at something far away. The ship's voice came again, soft and close. Specimen care schedule checked. It said no more. Lyra found a screen and made it show playback. The video was old and grainy. It showed creatures that looked like them. They were placed inside rooms like this. Humans moved around with notes. They tapped on a device. The creatures changed. Some laughed once, then did not. Some learned to speak their captors' names. In one clip, an alien stood and broke a small mirror. After, the human made a note and smiled. Mara's fist closed. She felt a fire inside her she had not felt before. It was small and hot. It was not only fear, it was anger. Tech looked at her. He had no words for this feeling. He only had hands. He held out a small device that hummed quietly. For reading logs, he said, for finding code. They ran files all night. They read rule after rule. They found a file marked, study, stress response. The file said humans believed they could learn the ways of other species by keeping them scared. Fear breeds truth, the note said. Mara wanted to scream the words back through the hull. She wanted to tear the pictures from the walls and throw them into the sea. Instead, she kept her mouth closed. Her plan grew sharp and cold. At dawn, the ship's viewports showed only empty black. The stars rolled like slow eyes. The harbor was far away. The calm man stood in the corridor and watched them with the same blank smile. Mara folded the map again. She hid it in her jacket. The red X burned on paper, like a small wound. She put her hand on the hole. The metal did not protest. It seemed to wait. Outside, the ship kept its speed. Inside, rules moved like teeth behind a lip. Mara understood one thing with the clear, terrible calm of the sea after a storm. They were not visitors. They were not guests. They were paperwork, and the paperwork had already been signed. Behind a locked door, the ship hummed a soft, cruel lullaby. The hull watched. The rules waited. The red X on the map shone like a promise. The ship did not move like other ships. It woke. At first the change was small. A low hum went through the floor. The lights crossed faster. The air tasted of metal and rain. Mara felt the sound in her bones. She had thought the ship was slow. She had thought they might walk home someday. Then the hull changed its mind. The stars outside the viewport began to smear. The harbor was a dark pinprick. The ship slid away into open space. Panic was quiet at first. People only blinked. Then a child on the lower deck began to cry. The sound spread like frost. Faces that had been calm turned thin and hard. The crew moved with smooth steps. They checked panels and said polite things. But their words had edges. In the common room, Mara stood with Lyra and Tech. The room smelled like old paper and hot metal. The photograph of Mara was still on the wall. It watched them with small light. "Why are we moving?" Lyra asked. Her voice was sharp. Her hands did not stop shaking. The calm man who had greeted them answered. He did not raise his voice. "We travel to the archive," he said. "It is standard. We deliver specimens to study." The word landed like a stone. Mara felt it. The ship's hum seemed to narrow around the word. "Study," she said. "We are not things." The man's eyes did not change. He smiled a small, tired smile. "Study keeps life safe," he said. "Humans learn. They do not want to harm." Tech put a hand on his tool belt. His fingers brushed cold metal. He had opened the hidden room. He had read the map. He had seen the red X. He had felt heat and something like a promise. Now his hands found a small box beneath his jacket. He opened it slow. Inside were tools shaped in human ways. There were thin rods and discs that smelled faintly of oil. There was a small device with a soft green eye. Tech held the eye up to the light. It blinked like a sleeping insect. "This can change pulses," he said. "It can speak to engines. It knows their language." Mara looked at the device, and then at the stars. The ship was already far. The map in her jacket burned with the memory of the red X. "We can stop it," she said. Her voice was low. It was not a question. They moved like a small storm. Lyra found a door map in the crew lounge. Tech read panels and found weak points. Mara watched people and read their faces. Fear and anger sat next to each other. It did not help them. It made them sharp. They found others who would not lie down. A pale woman with 3 rings on her arm nodded. A small man who worked near the engines said nothing, but his hands were ready. They met in the ship's belly where the air was thick, and the engine's song was loud. "We cut the lines," Tech said. "We short the coils. The engine will sleep and the hull will open." "How?" Mara asked. She had never been near engines like this, only the small boats at her home. These engines moved worlds. Tekk took a breath and smiled in a small way. "With human logic," he said. "They make rules and patterns. We will break the pattern in one spot. It will make the system think it is safe. Then it will open." They worked through the night. Their hands were clumsy at first. Human parts did not fit alien fingers well. They learned each fold and bolt and wire with fast, hungry minds. Every soft noise from the corridor made their hearts jump. At the edge of the engine room, a human crew member watched. He had a tired face and old scars. He came forward once and left. He did not speak. Some nights he would stand with the other crew and look at the stars. Sometimes his shoulders shook like a child. At last the device was ready. Tech fit the small green eye into a cavity near the engine core. It clicked into place like a new tooth. The engine's hum changed pitch. It was not loud. It was a tiny change that meant everything. They waited. The engine panel showed a row of lights. Red, red, red. Then one light flashed green. The engine had slumped into a quieter song. The ship shivered. Joy was a small, sharp thing. Lyra laughed. A little. She did not hide the sound. Mara felt hope like a thin rope in her hands. They ran for the cargo ramp. But the ship had rules written not only on paper. It had locks and teeth. As their feet hit the corridor, a new sound flew through. The ship, an alert. A voice, colder than the ship's usual tone, said, "Unauthorized modification detected. Lockdown protocol engaged." Doors slammed shut like jaws. Metal plates dropped over small windows. Hatches sealed with a sound that was final. The calm man who had greeted them stood at the nearest door. His eyes were not empty now. They were full of something old and closed. "You should not have done that," he said. The crew around him were quick and efficient. They knew the ship's body like a second skin. Buttons were pressed, and the ship answered. Mara felt the metal under her boots pulse. The ship did not move back. It tightened. The lights deepened into red. Somewhere far below, a machine made a deep, human sound. It was like a throat clearing. They were not outside the ship. They were inside its mind. The engine's quieter hum was a trick. The green light had been bait. Tech's face went white. He pulled at the device. The green eye blinked once, and then went dark. The engine picked up again with a roar that made the floor tremble. The corridor doors shivered and then locked for good. Someone shouted in the passage. It was short and sharp and full of wild hope. A crew member's hand closed on the calm man's sleeve, and the calm man turned. He did not shout back. He only nodded to a small panel on his belt. Mara pressed her hand to the cold wall. Her plan had been honest and sharp. It had cut a thread or two. It had not cut the web. Outside the viewport, stars were already thin lines. The ship was moving faster. The map in Mara's jacket felt heavier. The X on the map was a hot dot. The archive-weighted dot. A sound traveled under the engines now. It was not the ship's voice. It was deeper, older. It was like a drum that had been sleeping for a long time. Mara looked at Lyra and Tech. Lyra's eyes were all fire. Tech's hands trembled. Mara felt a hard calm settle in her chest. They had tried and failed. They had learned the ship could bait them. They had learned the crew could answer fast. She held the small box of human tools close. The ship's engine sang like a beast waking. The red lights pulsed like slow hearts. The doors that had once been open were now metal teeth. Mara thought. One clear thing. The ship wanted something from them. It wanted their fear to wake its engines. She did not know yet why. But she knew this to stop it. They must be cleverer than a trap. They must be braver than the sound of the hull. The engines' roar climbed. The alarms sang. The calm man watched. The ship moved on. The corridor to the archive smelled of old glue and cold metal. The lights here were very small. They looked like stars trapped in glass. Mara walked with Lyra and Tech close behind. The map in Mara's jacket burned like a small alarm against her ribs. They reached a heavy door. It had no windows. The calm man stood to one side. His face was softer now. He did not smile. He held a small key like a badge. He slid it into a slot, and the lock clicked. The door opened with a long, tired breath. Inside was a room that should not have fit on a ship. It was wide and deep. Shelves rose like cliffs. Between each shelf, light spilled down like clear water. On the shelves sat rows and rows of glass jars. Some were small, like berries. Some were large like drums. Each jar had a label in human handwriting. The Jars did not look empty. Light moved inside them. Some held a thin silver thread. Some held a small pulse like a trapped heart. When Mara leaned close, she heard a noise. It was not one sound. It was 100 small sounds layered together. Laughter, a word said once. A crack of a voice, a small animal's last call. The noises were not loud. They hummed like bees in glass. A crew member stood in the middle of the room. He had the tired face. He watched them with something like pity. "We keep pieces," he said. His voice was soft. "We keep what people leave in the open. We keep what they drop in panic. We keep their first fight and their last calm." Tech reached out to a jar with a sun inside it. The sun spun slow and bright. The label read Specimen Taurine Laugh 0312. Mara felt heat on her palm, even through the glass. Lyra touched the small jar, and it whispered a name in her language. Her eyes went wide. The jar had captured a word, like a bird. "Why?" Mara asked. Her voice did not hide the anger now. "Why keep these things? Why keep fear?" The crewman's mouth bent. He looked older than his years. "We study reaction," he said. "We learn. Fear makes patterns. Patterns teach us how life moves. We do not break life. We build a mirror." Lyra snapped at him. "A mirror that traps us." "Not trap," he said. "Preserve. Learn. Return what we can." They walked deeper. The shelves changed. Jars sat in rows under metal lamps. Some jars had tiny scenes trapped inside a field at dawn. A small house burning, hands breaking a toy. Others had a thin smoke inside that answered when Mara spoke. On one shelf, Mara found a jar that took her breath. The glass was clouded at the edges. Inside, a small light blinked like a trapped eye. The label read in neat script, "Mara Scream, July 14th. Her fingers shook before she touched it. The handwriting was the same as the calm man's keycard. She did not remember screaming like that. She did not remember the date. Her hands closed on the jar. The light inside pulsed like a small, slow heartbeat. When Mara put her ear to the glass, she heard a sound that was not her past. It was a sound she felt in her bones. It was a long, raw scream that filled the small room and left a taste like iron in the air. Lyra stepped back. Her face was pale. Tech reached for Mara's arm. "Do not open it," he said. His voice was urgent and thin. "We do not know what will happen." Mara did not listen. She had come this far to find a truth. The jar sat warm in her hands. The light inside blinked once like a question. The tired crewman watched without moving. "If you open it," he said, "you will hear what is inside. You might feel what was felt. It can change you." Mara looked into the glass. The scream in the jar was small and held back. It was like a promise. She thought of the map and the red X. She thought of her world under threat. She thought of the pictures on the ship's wall. She thought of the jars filled with things she loved. A fierce hunger rose in her. She wanted to smash every jar and throw the ship into the sea. Tech's fingers found a small human device in his pack. He had learned some of their scripts. He set the tool under the jar. The device read a soft pulse and threw up a small screen. Words moved in tiny letters. Containment, emotional signature. The screen read, "Release possible. Effects unknown." "Effects," Lyra said. "We cannot gamble with our minds." Tech looked up. "We have tools too," he said. "They can pull the feeling back out. They can lock it in another place. We can use what we learn." Mara thought of using the jars like weapons. She thought of freeing memory to flood the ship, maybe burn its will down. But she also felt the crewman's words. "Return what we can, learn." The human logic pushed like a tide inside the archive. It was a kind of cold mercy. It wanted to keep things safe by knowing them. The crewman stepped closer. He touched one jar gently, like a parent touching a sleeping child. "We do not always keep for harm," he said. "We keep to remember. When terrible things happen, we keep the shock so we do not let it repeat. We study to stop killing. Mara's mind turned. She had seen clips of creatures changed into mimicry. She had seen the ship's log. She had felt the map burn. She had felt the anger rise in her chest. The crewman's words felt small and true. He looked at her, and his eyes moved in a way that was not empty. For a moment, he looked human. Tekk. Single quotes. Device hummed a new note. It showed two options, release or absorb. The screen pulsed. Release will free the memory into the room, the device said. Absorb will take the memory into the tool. Both changed the jar. Mara's hands tightened around the glass. She could open it and let the scream fly out. She could free the sound and perhaps shake the ship's mind. She could also let Tech absorb it and keep it safe until they could decide. Either choice could save or ruin lives. She thought of her home. She thought of the red X. She thought of the child on the lower deck crying the night the ship left port. She thought of the jars on the shelves, holding pieces of others like a library of pain and learning. She looked at Lyra. Lyra's face was hard, ready to strike or to run. She looked at Tech. Tech's fingers trembled on the device. He looked at her as if she were a star he could not reach. Mara took a breath that felt like stepping into cold water. The jar's light blinked again. This time it was not only a question. It was an order. She had one choice to make. The map in her jacket felt small and urgent. The engine's roar still hammered through the ship. Outside, the stars kept moving. Mara set the jar on a small table. She lifted the lid. When the glass opened, the scream did not burst out like wind. It came slow. It filled the room like a shape. It moved through the shelves and touched the jars. The light inside the other glass twitched. The air trembled. Mara heard it, and inside that sound, she heard something else. Her own voice calling from a place she had not yet been. Her hands went cold. The scream inside the jar was both past and not yet true. The crewman's face went white. Tech lunged for the device. Lyra clapped her hands over her ears and whispered a prayer. The archive hummed. The jars whispered names. Outside, the ship's hull answered in a tone that sounded like a question. Mara knew one thing, with a sudden, sharp clarity. Opening a jar did not only free a memory, it could show a future. The ship answered Mara's scream with its own sound. It started small, a low rattling under the floor. Then the metal sang. The song bent like a blade. It moved through the halls and into the archive. The jars trembled on their shelves. People ran. Alarms flashed like red moons. The calm man stood very still. His face was pale. He had spent his life walking these rooms. Now he watched them break. Mara held the jar with her name. The light inside had stopped blinking. It sat quiet in her hands like a sleeping thing. The room smelled of hot glass and old words. Tech's device hummed at his belt. Lyra's hands were tight with anger. "We can absorb," Tech said. He held the tool like a shield. "We can take them in, hide them, save them for later." Mara thought of the child who had cried on the lower deck. She thought of the map and the red X. She thought of the ship's rulebook and the pictures on the wall. She knew what the jars could do. They could teach. They could trap. They could make species small. "If we hide them," she said, "they stay human property. They will still learn from us. They will still use fear." Lyra's jaw moved. "Then, smash them," she said. "Break their jars. Flood the ship. Make them taste what they did." Mara saw both ways. She felt the pull of both. Tech's tool was clever. Lyra's anger was pure. The crewman watched with eyes that held more than duty. He moved a small step forward. "You don't know what will happen," he said. "Release could change minds, or it could make worse. Humans are not one thing." Mara thought of the archive like a heart. The jars were its beats. She put the small jar down and looked at the shelves. Each glass held a life, or a part of one. They were not things only. They were pieces of being. She made her choice. We opened them all, she said. Not to hurt, not to hide, to make the ship listen. Lyra's face went hard. Tech's hands shook. The crewman's eyes widened like doors. Mara lifted the jar lid. The scream came out slow and cold. It slid through the room, through the rose, through the glass. It touched the other jars. Light jumped like small fires. Tech used his device. He set it to broadcast. The tool would take a memory and turn it into sound and light that the ship could not keep. He wanted to aim the broadcast at the hull, at the ship's mind. He prayed his small hands could speak to something made of metal and habit. One by one, they opened jars. The air filled with pieces of life. Laughter, a small summer day, a first kiss, a last goodbye, a child's wonder. Not only fear, not only screams. Things the ship had kept because people had left them behind in panic. Things it had catalogued to learn how to make others small. The hull answered. Its scream rose and fell like a living voice. It tried too close. Locks slammed, plates moved. The archive doors sealed. The ship's voice became a low, angry note. It meant, stop. Mara did not stop. The light from the jars rose, and Tech's device turned them into a wide signal. It fed into the ship's old speakers, and into the outer coms. The signal reached the crew's heads, and then the ship's brain. It went out a weak thread into space. The ship's calm crew moved with sharp fear. Some covered their ears. One young sailor held his face and began to cry. The tired man who had watched the jars stepped close to Mara. He had lived among captured memories for years. He touched a jar and did not move away. For the first time, his hands trembled. Outside, a line of small lights grew on the dark horizon. A human fleet came toward them like a ring. The ship's outer sensors blinked. The calm man looked up and then down. His hand went to his belt. On the bridge, the captain hit a button and a voice screamed a long, cold command. The fleet would not let a ship break its cargo. They would not let catalogs of other lives walk away. But the broadcast had reached the bridge too. It flowed through the fleet's channels like a strange wind. A captain on the leading ship heard a child laugh that was not their own. The commander felt a small hand close on his and smelled a field in a world he had never seen. An old admiral remembered a kindness he had given a stranger decades ago. The memories were not all the same. They were messy and bright and very human. The fleet did not fire. Back in the archive, Mara felt the hull shudder. The metal made a sound like a long, tired sob. The jars hummed, and then one by one they cracked. Glass split. Light spilled out like water. The room filled with sound. Not only screams, but songs, stories, small foolish jokes that made some men laugh and some women cry. The calm man fell to his knees. He took Mara's hand in his. His face had changed. We wanted to keep so we would. Not kill again, he said. His voice broke. We forgot the cost. The ship's engines tried to roar awake. Metal plates moved to seal the belly. But the light was in them now. It had found the ship's listening parts. It had put things in the place of fear. For a long second the hull paused. The engines hummed like a tired animal that had been given a memory of a child's first day. The archive doors blew open. The ramp folded down. The harbor far away and small lit like a ringed coin. The map in Mara's jacket stung with new meaning. The red X still burned, but now the path to it opened. Outside, the human fleet slowed. Lights dimmed. Orders were unspoken. The admiral on the lead ship sat back. He had been a man who followed rules. But the small memory that had found him, act of mercy he had seen long ago, bent his hands. He signaled hold. Mara walked to the ramp, Lyra at her side. Tech close behind, his device empty and silent. The calm man touched Mara's shoulder and did not stop her. He looked at the jars and at his people, and then out to starry black. "We will make returns," he said finally. "We will learn differently." Mara did not trust him fully. She had seen too much. But outside the viewport, her homeworld showed as a bright ring. Light rolled across its seas. In the far dark, the human fleet hovered like a question. The ship's hull made one last sound. It was not a scream now. It was a long, low tone that felt like both grief and song. The metal breathed and went quiet. Mara walked down the ramp. Her feet hit the dock. People on her world rushed forward. They grabbed her hands and cried and laughed. The red X on the map had changed into a route. Behind her, in the sky, the human fleet made slow turns. Some small lights faded and left. Others held back. The calm man watched them go, and he did not smile. Mara looked up at the dark where the fleet had been. She felt a new feeling, one that was not fear and not only anger. It was sharp, steady, and bright. It was hope. Why boarding a human ship was the worst idea. Because it changed everything.